So, hello everyone. If there are any new joiners, welcome to OWASP AppSecEU 2022 and the Exhibitor track. My name is Kristina Devochko. I'm a volunteer in the OWASP community, and I will, shall we see? Please wait. I will be your moderator for this session. Shall we see? During the next 45 minutes, you will be listening to Oliver Williams, who will be presenting a session called Early, Often and Everywhere, How to Meet the New Mobile Application Security Imperative. I think I'm hearing some background noise. Sorry about that.
Yeah, apologies. I do have some background noise here.
No worries. So please submit any questions that you may have during the session in the QA tab just to the right of this video in the Whova platform. I will be asking Oliver your questions in the last 10 minutes of this session. Oliver is EMEA Mobile Application Protection Lead at Zimperium and is with us today all the way from Abergavenny, Wales. With deep experience within the cybersecurity industry and mobile web app development, Oliver leads Zimperium's focus on mobile app security across Europe. So, Oliver, are you ready to take it away?
Yeah, I'm good to go when you are ready for me to start sharing my screen.
Yes, please do that. Thank you.
Okay, is that coming through nice and clear?
Everything is visible and everything is audible.
Perfect. So hey guys, thank you very much for joining our session today. As we introduced, what we're going to be talking through today is some of our observations and our experience in the world of mobile application security. Some of the information that we've gathered throughout various different activities we carry through, such as surveying and exploratory research. I will apologize as we go through this conversation. I am at an event today, so there's a bit of background noise. I do apologize for that. It is a little bit busy here. So we're going to dive into this. So we're going to start off just by discussing some of the industry conversations that we have. And one of the biggest names out there is Gartner. Gartner are very much thought leaders in the space. It's an emerging market. It's a very new area and it's very much growing at a big rate. So we listen to these guys for their observations from a wide perspective across the industry. Their big observation through this year is that mobile application security will be one of the biggest challenges for enterprises. Okay, more apps are out there, more attention is going on to the security of those applications, and the reward for exploiting those applications is getting bigger and bigger. Okay, especially as we move into the world of payments, etc. There's a lot more value in those solutions there. We see this as well, you know, we could fill this page, we could have many different slides and views on these different stories that come out here all the time. It's almost a weekly story now where there's new exploits, new leaks, new challenges that are seen throughout very well-known applications. It's going to keep continuing. Okay, this isn't going to change. This isn't going to go away. The attention's never going to leave the space as well. The best we can do is understand what those challenges are, start addressing them early in the build cycles as we develop these solutions, and ensure that we are taking a sensible approach to managing this risk. So some of the activities I mentioned before that Zimperium do is we really try to be thought leaders in this space. So we regularly survey independently thought leaders in different spaces, technology leaders, etc., to understand what are they seeing in their industries, in the spaces that they operate in, and what are the challenges they're trying to explore. So I'm going to walk through a few of these today with you. So one of the first ones we wanted to try and understand is, as you're deploying applications and you're addressing the security that is required to do this, what are the challenges? Okay, what do you perceive as the downside of addressing this? And the key takeaways really are, historically, there's a big trade-off between applying security measures to a solution and how that impacts the user experience. Okay, and this is one of the biggest concerns that we see leaders have in the space. As you then progress through that, it's the impacts of the dev cycle. Okay, you still want to be delivering, you still need to be hitting those goals, you still need to be doing it on the same budgets. Okay, you bring in security solutions, but you don't want to be bringing in additional security teams to grow their solutions. So it needs to be very low impact from that perspective as well. There's other ones there, there's many other areas, app size, etc., etc. Okay, user experience is clearly the biggest thing that impacts application security. If we then take another look at another area, okay, so as we start looking into again application security, what tasks people are most concerned about, so what areas are technology leaders concerned about the most? Okay, leading thought in the space right now is data storage and transmission. Okay, so as you collect data or receive data to a solution, is it being received securely? Is it being sent securely? Is it being generated securely? Okay, and then as you go down the chain, it's all about intellectual property and also supply chain attacks as well. Okay, so very much common themes, and as we talked about a couple of slides ago, these are the things that are driving these attacks that we've been seeing in the real world. One of the biggest emerging trends that we think we're going to see next, especially the supply chain attacks, repositories being attacked and things like that. And then as we start looking at mobile applications, what's the biggest risk out there? So if you own a mobile application, what is your perception on, where's your attack going to come from? What is the risk? Where's, the data breach going to be caused? Things like that. So the biggest one by far is malware installed on the same device. A very interesting observation for that. And we see that as well in our data set. We're going to be talking about this a little bit later in the session, but yeah, malware installed side by side with a device. This is really a strong trend right now in the financial markets as well, where Trojans are being designed to target banking applications, etc., posing as banking applications or targeting with overlay attacks, etc., the data in those solutions. Some other things are phishing campaigns, so targeted phishing campaigns against either a brand or an application. And then one of the other big areas as well is application reverse engineering. So taking an application which is already present on the App Store, for example, repackaging it with maybe malicious code or malicious changes to that solution, and then re-release it on third-party App Store. One of the other areas that we see working in lately is we released what we term as our global mobile threat report. And this is an Imperium-led activity that we carried out over the space of the back end of last year and early this year. And it's really our perspective on what's going on in the world of mobile security, not just in applications, but in the enterprise world as well. And I want to share some of the key observations that we've had from this. So one of the biggest things we've seen is the mobile-specific phishing has been on the rise heavily. And this is really driven, we believe, from the people are now working from home. A lot more people are starting to travel a bit more. And this has been driving a focus around phishing, where traditionally maybe these type of attacks may have been done on the network level in public hotspots, public networks, where people weren't visiting those. Attackers had to shift and they started using phishing to counter those attacks. So a lot of the phishing sites we've actually been analysing that we've been seeing out there are specifically targeted for mobile devices and content that is delivered to mobile devices. So of all phishing sites, the majority of those are focused at mobile device users. Some of the other areas as well. So when we looked at, and this was a piece of research that we did around financial applications. Okay, so we analysed hundreds of the top financial banking, payment provider solutions, etc. We found that approximately 81% of the applications that are released in just that vertical alone are leaking sensitive information. So that could be through cloud storage solutions, it could be through the libraries, it could be the way the code is implemented, it could be through SDKs that they're importing in solutions. But there is an incredibly high amount of applications out there, not just in the financial sector. We just picked a vertical to analyze, but this is a trend across all the different verticals. And there's many more different metrics that we look for. Okay, I mentioned before. So 10% of applications use some kind of cloud services in their backend. Again, a lot of these cloud services that people are using are not implemented correctly. Okay, so we did a big piece of research last year. We looked at over 1 million different mobile applications plus Android and iOS, and about 131,000 of those use publicly available cloud services inside them. Now, these aren't secured cloud services; these are public buckets of information, which are exposing personal information. So we had a big drive last year in really raising awareness on, okay, well, you're using cloud storage, but are you using it correctly? Yeah, and that was one of the biggest challenges from last year that we observed. Some of the other things from the mobile threat report, we could go into a lot of depth on these. And what I will invite you to do is reach out to us following the session, and we can actually direct you to the full threat report on this. Last year alone, we discovered over 5,000 brand new pieces of malware. Okay, that's not across the whole year. That is, on a regular daily basis. Okay. Malware is being generated constantly. It's not new elements of malware. It's being repackaged, being re-released, rebranded. It's a very high churn activity getting this malware out there. Okay. There's a massive increase as well on zero-day vulnerabilities that are being used to attack mobile devices. There's organizations such as the Rhodium out there, etc., who acquire and resell vulnerabilities and exploits for mobile devices. Last year, in 2020, as everyone was starting to be put into lockdown, etc., they actually halted their acquisition of iOS exploits because they saturated with them. Okay. So there is a big catalog not in the public view of exploits against mobile applications. Maybe they could be application focused, maybe they're, for example, targeting WhatsApp, or they may be device targeting. Both have implications for app developers though. So there is a big market behind the scenes that we don't have access to or we have visibility of. But from just the figures from acquisitions, we can see that it is a very ripe market. There's a lot of money to be made from security researchers there. Again, please do reach out to us if you'd like to get a full copy of this report. We're more than happy to direct you towards it. So some of the other things I want to talk about, just to kind of move towards the back end of the session today, is to start understanding, some of the questions that we see around different areas of mobile application security, and also talk about some of the best practices that we share with our customers. Okay. So when you start looking across the software development lifecycle, there's what we would see as 4 key areas. They're the areas that we specialize in as well. The first of those is mobile security testing. Okay, so this is the ongoing assessment of mobile applications as they're being developed on a ongoing automated basis. Okay, and some of the questions that we need to start asking ourselves a lot more is, are we accessing and storing sensitive data, and where are we doing that? Okay, and that's one of the big trends, again, as we mentioned earlier on, is about how that data is secured safely. And if we start looking into the best practices behind this, as we look at building mobile applications, what we recommend to all of our customers and partners, start testing these mobile applications early. Okay, don't wait until you're about to release it or send an application off for pen testing to do a test. One of the biggest challenges our customers face is fail pen tests, and they can fail for very simple reasons. Very simple misconfigurations, things that were missing, things where obfuscation was not applied correctly, all these kind of very common areas. So start testing early as you develop the application, not when you try to release it. Okay, it will make life a lot easier, and it will be a cheaper process as well. You won't have the failed pen tests, you won't have delayed releases, etc. When you do testing, make sure you do both static and dynamic testing. I mentioned before about supply chain attacks. So one of the big areas that we believe in is if you start doing dynamic testing with taking a compiled version of an application, apply it on a physical device and apply telemetry to see what happens as you use it. We've observed previously where SDKs or libraries that people have found on open source sites or through supply chains and recommendations, though statically, Those libraries are very benign. They don't have any malware samples or phishing examples to speak of. But once they are delivered to a device and they are running for a certain period of time, they then change their posture. They may pull down some of the content, they may start working in a different way. So definitely there's a lot of value in both the static side, but also that dynamic testing is critical. These solutions should be highly integrated inside your environment as well. They shouldn't be a new process that you need to adopt and start having new teams to manage. Everyone has a CI/CD pipeline of some sort of people, whether that is they're just using Jenkins or Git or something like that to store data and just make sure it's centrally accessible. Or you are a mature CI/CD pipeline where you've got all your tools highly integrated. No matter where you sit inside that journey of evolution inside the CI/CD pipeline, start integrating early on. So make sure these testing solutions are part of that pipeline. Okay, it means that when you promote your builds or you commit new code, those kind of processes, you can trigger the testing. So it means you could trigger testing maybe on a Friday afternoon as you all leave, and then on Monday when you come back, you'll have a set of results that you can then start analyzing and going into. Also on that integration perspective, make sure you're also leveraging things like ticketing systems. So if you're discovering challenges in the applications, one of the best things to do is get those straight back to the developers. Okay, make sure that those developers are fixing these problems as soon as they're identified. It's going to be a lot less expensive on release cycles if you're doing that. The testing criteria as well, so standardization. So the solutions that we develop are big users of the OWASP standard. Okay, so for example, we just added MassVS to the security testing standard. So every time that you identify issues, make sure you understand what the implication is for a security compliance framework, or if you are looking at financial markets, PCI, if it's healthcare, HIPAA, or if it's been released in Europe, GDPR. Make sure you're not just testing and looking for problems, but also understand where that fits inside industry standards, such as MassVS. And this should be a collaborative approach. Okay? This shouldn't just be a closed cycle inside the development team. The security and development team should be working together to accept risks if they can't be fit, or at least be aware of risks associated with the end artifacts. So I'm going to move on to the next section, which is all around cryptographic key protection. Okay, so this is really focused around how you secure your keys, your secrets, and how you execute things such as encryption, decryption, and things. Some of the questions that we ask our customers and people to consider is, when you are leveraging keys and encryption, do you have a standard practice across your mobile, your web, and desktop applications? One of the challenges that you can fall into is if you don't have a standardized approach or a common approach, a common set of tools, that's when you start leaving gaps. You need to start asking yourself, well, okay, so you're maybe securely generating your keys, but how do you distribute those keys? How do you store those keys? Okay, so you need to make sure, and also when they're being used, okay, to make sure those keys are secured throughout all those different processes. And then also that execution environment. Okay, so if you've delivered your key to decrypt data to a device, how do you ensure that that remains safe even in the most insecure environments? Okay, so even if a device is compromised or jailbroken, you need to ensure that those encryption keys are not taken. Okay? It's a challenge. It's a big area to focus on, but these are all solvable problems. So best practice. So let's talk about the best practice. Never hard-code keys in the software. I think it's one of the biggest, most common things that people consider about is don't leave your secrets in plain text or inside code. Don't leave them in a commit ticket, like those kind of things. But you should never hard code your decryption as well in these solutions. Try and limit your keys to a specific purpose. Okay, so if you are receiving or streaming data, for example, make sure you have a key that is dedicated to that specific purpose. Okay. Reuse of keys is challenging from both a security practice because they're being used a lot more, but then also if you're reusing those keys, it can also be a challenge if something changes. You need to make sure all those keys are then updated. when you start looking at the implementation of these kind of solutions, hardware-backed security is historically a big trend. It's also a big challenge. So if you look at hardware-backed solutions such as using Apple keychains, some of the Google and Samsung solutions that you have out there, it limits the potential user base that you have. If you're building a solution that requires some kind of hardware-backed security, and you want to have adoption across every single Android device, the cheaper Android devices don't have support for those. So you're going to be immediately reducing your potential user base. It's also quite costly, both from a physical and consumption basis. Okay, so software-based solutions are definitely the way for a wider adoption. And to be honest, it makes life a lot easier to design and implement these solutions as well. So you're designing a solution for Android in general instead of trying to design a solution for Samsung devices, for Google devices, etc. And make sure those keys are managed throughout your entire solution stack. So it's all well and good, having security key generation, but then how do you deliver those keys to the device? Then also, how do you use those keys once they're on the device? Okay, so they're all really, really important things to consider. Not just, is it securely stored on the back end, but is it securely stored, used, transmitted to these devices? Okay, really try to take advantage of white box cryptography where you can, because it helps address these detection gaps that you will have. And moving on to the third area is all around shielding. Okay, so this is really focused on anti-tampering, anti-reversing technology. So things to ask yourself, what protections do you put in place before you release your app to the App Store? You spent a lot of time developing the intellectual property and codes that you're releasing. Okay, it's on open source, but that once you start building commercial solutions, etc. as well, there's definitely challenges around the libraries and some of the embedded elements. Some of those need to remain secure because they're doing very bespoke, unique, sensitive activities. So how do you ensure that they are protected against static attacks? Okay. And then also your application against being tampered and republished on App Store. Okay, this is a big area, and I mentioned this in the statistics earlier on, is how can we ensure that if you're releasing a great quality solution out there, that no one's going to repackage it. We had a recent experience where we were talking to a hotel company. They spent years developing this mobile application for the hotel chain, and they inadvertently, by accident, came across a clone of their application being used by a completely different hotel chain, a completely different company, but they just reskinned their application and reused their application by reverse engineering. So there's a lot of challenges out there around how you protect your brands, but also the identity that you're building. Talking about some best practices in the space, there's a lot of alignment needed. Okay, so both from the privacy and product security teams, there's a lot of understanding that you need to have and make sure it's clear around things like data classification and how you protect those different areas of data. Okay, so we're not just talking about keys at this point, it's secrets, it's how do you authenticate users and those kind of things, URLs, strings, all those kind of things. And then also from the product security team, if something does go wrong, what countermeasures do you want to take? Which pieces of code are the areas that if something has been changed, do you need to, respond strongly? And how does that response work? Your protections need to be highly tunable. Now, this is, we mentioned right at the start of the session, one of the biggest challenge for security solutions in mobile applications is the impact on the user experience. So if you just blindly apply security to these solutions, it's going to have a negative impact to these user experiences. Okay, we see it all the time. You have applications that double in size just from static security protections, or you have applications that randomly crash because parts of the code are being incorrectly protected. So we need to make sure that these protections are optimized for not just the performance for the user, but then also the size of the device. Okay. And again, once the application is released, are you getting visibility into it once it's released? Do you know if something has gone wrong? and then what's your approach if something goes wrong. Okay, make sure you have a procedure and a plan behind how you handle the outcome of these protections being put in place. So then the final area that I kind of want to talk about from these recommendations is runtime protection, okay, self-protection. So as you start moving into a space that's more of an evolving space, it's a much newer area of protection. There's a lot more questions to start asking yourself as well, because it's a deeper area before. So you have to ask yourself, how do you monitor your install base right now to ensure that all these applications you're releasing are not losing data, they're not being abused? Do you have visibility of that? Do you have the opportunity to do that? Or is it something that you feel that you could have? Okay. Should you release this application? How do you see end user data, but then also the device and your brand from that application running in an environment that may have malware, malicious access point, device compromises, elevation of privilege, all these kind of different types of attacks that you see out there. How is your application protecting against those kind of things? Is it aware of it? Is it going to be all questions to ask yourself? How do you keep that protection up to date as well? So obviously,
we missed you for a second there, Oliver. I was just wondering if you could repeat the last sentence. You broke up a bit.
No worries, no worries. So I was just saying, so the malware, the types of malware and different various exploits that are being developed out there, what we need to do is ensure that the protections that we're putting into place in these solutions are up to date. They are able to protect against these new pieces of malware, these new exploits, new phishing attempts, all these kind of different vectors that we see out there. How are you going to keep that solution up to date so that when these new types of attack emerge, you're protected against them? Okay, it's a really challenging area to address. So it's a really important question to be asking. And to address that, how do you do these things without re-releasing an application? One of the most costly things that we could be asking people to do is redevelop and re-release an application onto the App Store every time a new threat is seen. How do we achieve this without requiring someone to redevelop or move things into the backlog just to prioritize security? They're all really good questions. So then if we look at the best practice behind this, some of the things we recommend every customer should do. So look at the threat modeling before you approach RAS. Okay, you need to understand, what the risk to your application. Okay, so if let's say you have a financial banking solution, you need to be able to protect the transactions, the authentication, the data of the user, as a few examples. So we need to then understand what threats to that data could be, and then that helps us define, if an attacker is trying to access those things, how they would do it. We need to ensure the threat detection is tightly embedded inside an application, but it's also giving the visibility both to the application, but also you as a solution provider or a application management team to that threats and the threats and risks that are being seen on the device. Okay, we see and monitor threats across device, network, applications, and phishing. You need to make sure that all those different areas are becoming visible to the application, so that you can orchestrate remediations against it, but also you're aware of those things as well. Okay, that awareness, you need to be feeding that back into some kind of SIEM platform or fraud mitigation tools. Every application is different, every solution is different. The requirements behind it are quite often tied to compliance standards as well. So as we start looking at the future of maybe PCI compliance, the focus is going to be shifting a lot more around data collection and data being able to make use of that data as part of the solution. So that data needs to be collected and used in a useful manner. The response policies need to be automated. So there's no point collecting this data or becoming aware of these threats if you're not going to be having automated responses. The time it would take someone on a human to respond to this on an application side is too long. If someone is actively hooking into or tampering with an application to try and steal data, that remediation needs to be automated and ready to go when the threat is detected. Okay. solutions, as I mentioned before, one of the key questions is any solution that is implemented should be able to evolve without requiring you to re-release your application. We don't, as solution providers and security researchers and companies, we don't want to be advising people to approach security in a way that means it's an overhead for them, especially from an ongoing release basis. So what we need to be doing is ensuring that solutions that are being provided are adaptable, they can evolve without requiring new releases and more development time on an ongoing basis. Okay. So just to kind of wrap up the session today, I just kind of want to give our perspective on some of the key things that we should be, or you should be asking mobile security vendors, researchers, people in the market, as you start looking at addressing these problems. Okay, these are some of the key things to ask. So if you're looking at solutions out there, okay, you need to be understanding not just how those solutions are helping you, secure yourself against attacks. Okay, you don't want a binary yes it does. You want to understand the mechanisms, the solutions, the features that are being implemented to ensure that they're the right mitigations for you. Okay. We mentioned before about that whole understanding of your requirements behind the security approach. It needs to map against the solutions that are being provided. Again, do you have to update your application every time you want to improve the security policy? You don't want to be doing that, so you need to make sure you're not falling into that trap. What happens if the device is not, offline? So many applications out there, they're designed to be online all the time, but there's always a risk where you have cache data on the device, it goes offline and someone starts tampering with it. Okay, it's one of the things that a security researcher will do, especially if it seems like the application is talking to some kind of cloud-based service to analyze data, metadata, use some kind of machine learning cloud-based service. We need to ensure that even if the device is not connected to the internet, the protection continues. Okay. The solution should be benefiting you as well from the solution release perspective. So it shouldn't be delaying release cycles. The solution should be helping accelerate your release cycles. Okay. So you need to you don't ask the question, is this going to stop me from releasing my application, or what's the negative impact? You want to be looking for a positive impact on your release cycle. Okay, these solutions are designed to help you. I mentioned before about automated security testing. That should be, one of the things that you're using to ensure that your testing is done early, so that you can accelerate and have confidence when you go to things like pen testing. And also make sure you reach out for references and examples. Okay, to make sure not just have you got a customer using this solution, but how have you helped a customer achieve a certain certification, for example. Okay, so how did you make that customer successful? Okay, that's really what you want to be looking for. So from that perspective, and from that comment, that's everything I want to walk through today. It's our perception on what is happening out there. This is real data, real research that we've been doing, and all of these recommendations are all based on customer journeys we've been on and people that we work with in the industry. So thank you very much for listening.
All right, thank you so much, Oliver, for this interesting session. Shall we see? I think we have a few questions. So the first question would be, are there any best practices for reducing the risk to release cycles from failed pen tests that you could mention?
Yeah, so great question. So yes, as I mentioned in the session before, failed pen tests are one of the biggest risk points in releasing an application, especially before it's installed on the device. So yeah, shift left security. Okay, so make sure your security testing is being done during development. It means you're fixing the problems as soon as they're identified. And it means that as you go to pen tests, there's a lot more confidence in that cycle that, pen tests aren't going to be failing for, missing obfuscation and things like that. They're going to be failing for at least a genuine reason, not something that could be fixed early
on. Yes, thank you. And are there any best or good approaches to handle application security improvements in response to new threats happening every day?
Yeah, so using solutions that can improve, maybe they are dynamically updated, or maybe they are using things like machine learning to not look at threats based on known dictionaries and libraries and hashes, but they're using more of a behavior approach to focus more on the behavior changes that are happening on the device, because behavior changes are a side effect of whatever threat is coming in. So if we abstract away the behavior from what's causing the behavior, it means that we can be a lot more intelligent around being future-proof in these solutions.
Absolutely, and the way you mentioned it, that there are new types of malware coming out every day, if not every hour. I mean, you really need to get creative and innovative as well in securing the mobile industry.
Yeah, 100%.
And while we are on to that, let's say I'm really concerned about the security posture of my app, of the app I'm developing. So where should I start?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So it depends entirely around what you're developing. This is a conversation that you should definitely have with security teams, the compliance teams, because you don't necessarily have to have every security solution under the sun. If you're doing things with encryption, decryption, you should definitely be focusing on things like your keys. I believe every organization, every developer, every team can benefit from regular security testing. So regular testing, as you're developing code, anyone can benefit from. As you move into things like, as I mentioned, encryption, decryption, that can be a bit more bespoke and based on needs and demands. Everyone needs some kind of static protection. There's never a case that you can argue that you don't need any static protection, because otherwise you're just leaving yourself open to repackaging attacks or people injecting code into your application, those kind of things. And the dynamic approach, that is very much an evolving area. It's definitely something that people should look into around what the runtime threats are to their application, and then also how they would, mitigate those, if they were to occur.
Yeah, thanks. And that's one thing when I'm the one that is developing an application, or when I'm very familiar with kind of IT and maybe information security. But what if I am an unexperienced user and even an employee of a company? So, and how do I know that? Are there any recommendations on how I can know if this application is safe that I want to download or that I want to use? Are there any main pinpoints I can be on the lookout for to kind of say, hey, this looks shady. I shouldn't probably download that.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, there's always, as someone that spends a lot of time in the industry, there's always sort of obvious things out there. Free applications that are supposed to be offering you premium features and things like that. Things that are making the package. Having solutions available to you to test for those kind of things is always good. Being able to scan an application, being able to analyze an application. I think the biggest problem that anyone that owns and develops an application will have is, what if those applications installed alongside your application as well? What's the impact as well? So definitely being able to be aware of the presence of those sort of applications alongside your application. That's another really key area.
Yeah. Yes, and from your experience, since you have been communicating with many customers, are there any interesting scary vulnerabilities you have seen, and kind of what has the consequence of those been? Do you have your own real life stories related?
We work a lot of organizations, and some have been hacked, some haven't. So there's some companies we work with who have had ransomware attacks. They've nearly lost all of their company data. We've got some customers, and one of them, they nearly lost all their data, and they only managed to survive because they have one server blade out that had a copy of all of their Active Directory, etc., and allowed them to get back online. So since then, they've been very nervous. But from an application perspective, there's always risks. You know, people may be aware of things like checkmate vulnerabilities for iOS. So there's hardware vulnerabilities on older iPhone devices, which are still supported by Apple. So iPhone 8 is an example, iPhone X. They have a hardware vulnerability in them, which can mean that anyone can get elevation privilege on them, and it's unpatchable. So that effectively means that if you're deploying a solution to iPhone, you're going to be coming across that. Okay, you can't exclude those devices from your deployment, so you have to be, conscious that you're deploying to devices that will be vulnerable. Okay, these devices will have the capability to be freely exploited. You just need to be, aware of that and be prepared to mitigate against that.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds really scary. I mean, the consequences can be really huge, and the way I feel it, maybe at least for a regular user, it's harder to identify if something is potentially vulnerable when you're accessing it from mobile. At least like on the PC, on the laptop, you have like more built-in tools, easier at least to look into the phishing emails, easier to identify if those links are vulnerable, but it might not be that straightforward doing that from the mobile phone, and you need to be really like aware of that. I just remember from my own experience, like we have this built-in application that kind of sends you this training phishing emails that you can like report, and then you can get points and train yourself on it. And once I checked it from my mobile phone, and I was actually once really caught by that. So it looked really familiar, and I couldn't check the link, and I opened this Excel sheet that looked like reporting, and then it said, hey, you kind of you got caught here. That could have been a phishing email. So I mean, this is much harder, I feel, at least when it comes to mobile security, than normal regular web application.
Yeah, mobile devices are designed to be a lot more user friendly. So it's actually a lot easier for an attacker to make a web page look like the web page of another company, make an email look like it's from Amazon, for example, send you an SMS message that looks like it's from your bank. It's actually a lot easier to phish and spoof those kind of things on a mobile device than it is a traditional desktop laptop environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about the applications themselves, but are there any settings in the mobile in iOS or in Android like that would be really good to ensure that you have them turned on? Anything you could recommend to also be proactive on making it more secure to use your phone?
Yeah, of course. So I mean, if you're a standard user, you've got a iOS device, the best thing you can do is keep it patched. It's the same for any device. Don't delay patching. There's no reason to delay your updates. But if you look at the security content behind every single iOS release, so Apple's a very good marketing company. And if you look at every single iOS release, they just list on the cover the new features or bug fixes. And then there's a little link down the bottom that says, click here for the security content of this update. When you click on that security content update, it has lots and lots of CVEs being patched. Now, they don't put that on the front cover. You have to go and look for that. But every single release that Apple's putting out are addressing at least some, nearly always, some very high CVE numbers every release. And they just don't put on the front cover. Google, Android, it's a little bit more transparent, but there's no difference in there's no reason you should delay these updates. Okay, I don't see any valid reason to do that anymore. Things like Android, it's a lot more open, so you've got a lot more access to options. So simple things like don't enable developer options unless you have to. Don't enable USB debugging unless you have to. These things, yes, they're great for side loading APKs, free applications, but they actually create a massive security hole on that device as well. So just from a standard user perspective, just ensure your device is not misconfigured. When we work with our enterprise customers, that's the biggest risk to their organizations that we see. We do see jailbroken devices. We see customers using our solution and seeing the security, like even in the security teams, people have jailbroken devices and they don't know they've got them until, well, they pretend they didn't know they were jailbroken, but yeah, only when they install solutions to detect these kind of things, they see it. But it's the biggest risk to a lot of enterprises as well is these unpatched and misconfigured devices.
And probably not attempt to jailbreak your device, or at least acquire a jailbreak device either.
yeah, it's always tricky to say don't try and open, make your device more open to you, but you are effectively rooting your device in order to do that. And by rooting your device, you do create a massive security hole on that device as well.
Absolutely, that's a very, very good point. Yes, I think we are getting to the end of our questions, but one last one, a more general one. Are there any other upcoming events or conferences where you're going to speak, where we can see you next time?
So we do have many events coming up. We're going to be doing a lot of our enterprise ones with a lot of our OEM customers coming up. We do have a section on our webpage where we talk about our upcoming events in different regions, so across Europe, the globe. I'm actually talking today. I'm at Money 2020 in Amsterdam at the moment, so I've been doing a lot of work with some of our financial customers as well, and the upcoming standards inside the financial markets. So there's always events coming up that we're going to be at. Best way to do that is always look at our webpage to see where we're going to be speaking and attending.
Yeah, very cool. But thank you once again for an interesting session, Oliver, for a good discussion on an important topic of mobile security. And I would also like to thank all of our participants who have joined this session today. And next up is 1 hour lunch pause for all of us. But after that, we are ready to go again. And in the exhibitor track, we'll be kicking off after lunch with Adam Brown, who will present over a decade of software security, what have we learned? And if you would like to check other sessions that will be happening in parallel tracks, please do check the agenda on the Hova platform. So I would like to thank everyone once again. Enjoy your lunch and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.
Thanks all.